It was a regular Tuesday morning when Jake first walked into the community center. He had been looking for something meaningful to do with his free time, something that would make him feel useful. The bright poster on the bulletin board at his local coffee shop had caught his attention. Volunteers needed. Help adults learn to read. Without thinking too much about it, he had signed up. The community center smelled like fresh coffee and old books. Jake stood at the entrance, feeling a bit nervous. He had never done anything like this before. The coordinator, an elderly woman with kind eyes, showed him around and explained how the program worked. Adults who had never learned to read properly would come in twice a week, and volunteers would sit with them one-on-one to help them practice. That's when he saw her. She was sitting at a corner table with an older gentleman, patiently helping him sound out words from a simple storybook. Her voice was soft and encouraging. "That's perfect, Mr. Johnson. You're doing so well today." Jake noticed how comfortable she looked, how naturally she connected with her student. There was something calming about her presence. During the coffee break, Jake found himself standing near her at the snack table. She was arranging cookies on a plate with careful attention. "First day?" she asked, looking up with a warm smile. Her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled, and Jake felt immediately at ease. "Is it that obvious?" He laughed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm Jake, by the way." "I'm Lisa," she replied, offering him a cookie. "Don't worry, everyone feels nervous at first, but you'll love it here. These people are so brave, coming and to learn something new at their age. It's really inspiring." Jake spent the rest of that first session thinking about what Lisa had said. She was right. His student, a woman in her 50s who had dropped out of school to work, was incredibly determined. But he also found himself thinking about Lisa's gentle way of explaining things, how she made everyone feel comfortable and valued, week after week. Jake looked forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays, not just because he enjoyed helping people learn, but because he got to see Lisa. She always arrived 15 minutes early, setting up materials and chatting with the regular students. She remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, and celebrated their small victories like they were huge accomplishments. Jake started arriving early too, telling himself it was just to be better prepared. But really, he loved those quiet moments before the session started when he and Lisa would chat about their weeks, share stories about their students, or laugh about silly things that had happened. Lisa had a way of making ordinary moments feel special. She would bring homemade cookies for the students. Remember that Mr. Rodriguez liked his coffee black, and always had encouraging words for someone who was struggling. Jake found himself drawn to her kindness, her patience, and the way she seemed to genuinely care about everyone around her. One Thursday, Lisa's student didn't show up. Instead of leaving early, she offered to help Jake with his lesson. They worked together with an elderly man who was learning to read letters from his grandchildren. Lisa sat beside Jake, occasionally offering gentle suggestions or encouragement to their student. Jake became very aware of how close she was sitting, how her hand would briefly touch his when she pointed to something on the page. After the session, they walked to their cars together. "You're really good at this," Lisa said. "I can tell you genuinely care about the students." "I learned from watching you," Jake replied. "You have this gift of making everyone feel important." Lisa blushed slightly. "I just think everyone deserves to feel valued, you know? These people are working so hard to improve their lives. The least we can do is make sure they feel supported." As the months passed, Jake and Lisa fell into a comfortable routine. They would chat during breaks, sometimes grab coffee after sessions, and occasionally text each other about funny things their students had said or done. Jake learned that Lisa worked as a nurse at the local hospital, that she had a cat named Whiskers, and that she made the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. Jake found himself thinking about Lisa more and more. He looked forward to seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, and listening to her stories. He admired how she treated everyone with such respect and kindness. When she talked about her work at the hospital or her plans to expand the literacy program, her passion was contagious. But Jake was careful. Lisa was the kind of person who was genuinely nice to everyone. He didn't want to misread her friendliness as something more. Their friendship was too precious to risk ruining it by assuming she felt the same way. He was beginning to feel. Sometimes, though, Jake caught moments that made him wonder. The way Lisa would seek him out in a crowded room during volunteer appreciation events. How she remembered that he liked his coffee with extra sugar. The comfortable silences they shared. During long walks to their cars after particularly emotional sessions. One evening, after helping a student read a letter from his son for the first time, Jake and Lisa sat in the empty community center, both feeling emotional about what they had witnessed. Days like this remind me why I love doing this, Lisa said softly. Me too, Jake agreed. Though I have to admit, working with you makes it even better. Lisa looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. For a moment, something passed between them, something deeper than friendship. But then she smiled and began packing up her materials, and the moment was gone. Jake drove home that night knowing that his feelings for Lisa had grown into something he could no longer ignore. But he also knew that what they had built together was special, and he wasn't sure he was ready to risk losing it. 3 months had passed since that moment in the empty community center, and Jake couldn't get it out of his head. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he would wake up with butterflies in his stomach, knowing he would see Lisa. What had started as simple friendship was becoming something much more complicated for him. Jake found himself paying attention to the smallest details about Lisa. The way she always wore a silver bracelet on her left wrist. How she hummed softly while organizing her teaching materials. The fact that she always brought an extra sweater because the community center was cold. These little things filled his thoughts throughout the week. During one particularly busy session, Jake watched Lisa help Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who was learning to read so she could help her grandson with homework. Lisa was incredibly patient, repeating the same word over and over without showing any frustration. When Mrs. Chen finally got it right, Lisa's face lit up like she had just won the lottery. "You're amazing with her," Jake said during their coffee break. Lisa shrugged, stirring sugar into her cup. "She reminds me of my grandmother. She never learned to read either, but she was the wisest person I knew." Jake wanted to tell her that she was pretty amazing too, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, he just smiled and changed the subject to something safer. The problem was getting worse. Jake caught himself daydreaming about Lisa during work meetings. He would wonder what she was doing at the hospital, if she was having a good day, if she was thinking about him too. His coworkers started teasing him about being distracted, asking if he had met someone special. "Just a friend," Jake would always say. But even he was starting to realize how unconvincing that sounded. Things got more complicated when Lisa started canceling plans with other people to spend time with him after their Thursday sessions. She would suggest they grab dinner instead of going straight home. They would sit in the small diner down the street, talking about everything and nothing. During one of these dinners, Lisa mentioned that her friends were always asking about her mystery man. Mystery man? Jake laughed, though his heart was racing. "They think I'm hiding some secret boyfriend because I keep turning down their invitations to go out," Lisa explained, twirling her pasta around her fork. "I told them I'm just busy with work and volunteering, but they don't believe me." Jake didn't know what to say to that. Part of him wanted to ask why she was turning down other plans, but he was too scared of the answer. What if she said it was just because she enjoyed helping people? What if he was reading too much into everything? The tension between them was becoming impossible to ignore. During their tutoring sessions, Jake would catch Lisa looking at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. When they walked to their cars together, sometimes their hands would accidentally brush, and neither of them would pull away immediately. One evening, they were cleaning up after a particularly successful session. Jake was putting books back on the shelf when he turned around and found Lisa standing very close to him. She was holding a stack of papers, but she seemed frozen in place. "Sorry," she whispered, stepping back quickly. It's okay," Jake said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. They stood there for a moment, the air between them thick with something unsaid. Jake felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, wanting to jump, but terrified of falling. Lisa cleared her throat and went back to organizing her materials. But Jake noticed her hands were shaking slightly. The next week, Jake decided to test the waters. He started paying closer attention to Lisa's reactions when he was around. He noticed that she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, even the ones that weren't that funny. She had started wearing her hair down more often, and he caught her checking her reflection in the community center windows. During their coffee break, Jake mentioned that his sister was visiting from out of town and wanted to meet his volunteer. "Friends, I'd love to meet her," Lisa said immediately, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, if you want me to." "I know. Family time is important. I'd really like you to meet her," Jake said, and he meant it. He wanted his sister to meet Lisa, wanted to see them together, wanted to know what his sister thought about this woman who had completely taken over his thoughts. But as the day approached, Jake started to panic. What if his sister could see right through him? What if she asked Lisa embarrassing questions? What if Lisa figured out how he really felt and got scared away? The night before his sister was supposed to arrive, Jake lay awake staring at the ceiling. He thought about all the moments he and Lisa had shared over the past few months. The way she had comforted him when his student had struggled with a particularly difficult lesson. How she had saved him a piece of cake from the volunteer appreciation party. The time she had driven him home when his car wouldn't start. Jake realized he was in love with Lisa. Not just attracted to her, not just enjoying her company, but genuinely, deeply in love. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. He knew he couldn't keep going like this much longer. The pretending was exhausting. Every time they said goodbye, he wanted to tell her how he felt. Every time she smiled at him, he wanted to kiss her. Every time they shared one of their comfortable silences, he wanted to fill it with the words that were burning inside him. But he was also terrified of losing what they had. Their friendship was the best thing in his life. What if he told her how he felt and she didn't feel the same way? What if things became awkward between them? What if she stopped coming to the community center? Jake fell asleep that night knowing that something had to change soon. He couldn't keep living in this space between friendship and something more. The question was whether he was brave enough to do something about it. The autumn leaves were falling like golden confetti as Jake and Lisa walked through Riverside Park. It had become their favorite place to go after particularly emotional tutoring sessions. Today had been one of those days. They had watched Mr. Williams read his first complete sentence to his wife over the phone, and both Jake and Lisa had gotten teary-eyed. "I love how this program changes people's lives," Lisa said, kicking at a pile of leaves. "But days like today really get to me." Jake nodded, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. He had been carrying a heavy weight in his chest for weeks now, and it was getting harder to breathe around it. Every time he looked at Lisa, every time she smiled at him, every time they shared these quiet moments together, the words he wanted to say grew louder in his head. They reached their usual bench by the pond, the one where they had shared so many conversations over the past year. The setting sun was painting everything in warm orange and pink colors, making Lisa's hair look like it was touched with gold. Jake sat down next to her, leaving the careful distance he always maintained, even though every part of him wanted to sit closer. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "can I ask you something?" His heart started racing. "Of course." "Do you ever think about what would happen if things were different? If we had met somewhere else? Under different circumstances?" Jake's breath caught in his throat. This was dangerous territory. The kind of conversation that could change everything between them. "What do you mean?" Lisa was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks swim across the pond. "I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder about the paths we take, the choices we make. Like, what if we had never volunteered at the community center? We never would have met." "That's a scary thought," Jake said honestly. "I can't imagine not knowing you." She turned to look at him then, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made his pulse quicken. "Me neither." They sat in comfortable silence, but Jake could feel the tension building between them. This was the moment he had been both hoping for and dreading for months. He could feel the words forming in his throat, demanding to be spoken. "Lisa," he started, then stopped. His mouth felt dry. "Yes?" Jake took a deep breath. He thought about all the conversations they had shared, all the moments that had led to this one. He thought about the way she made him feel more like himself than he had ever felt before. He thought about the possibility of losing her friendship. And then he thought about the possibility of never telling her how he felt. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa turned her whole body toward him on the bench. "I'm listening." Jake looked at her face, at the way the golden light was catching her features, at the gentle expression in her eyes. He had practiced this moment 100 times in his head, but now all is carefully planned. Words seemed to disappear. "I've been thinking about this for months," he began, his hands trembling slightly. "And I know this might change everything between us, but I can't keep pretending anymore." Lisa's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. "The truth is," Jake continued, gathering courage with each word, "I've fallen in love with you, not just as a friend, but really, truly in love. I love the way you care about everyone around you. I love how you remember the smallest details about people. I love your laugh, the way you hum when you're concentrating, the way you always bring extra sweaters because you know the community center is cold." Jake paused, his heart pounding so hard. He was sure Lisa could hear it. "I love how passionate you get when you talk about helping people. I love that you see the good in everyone, even when they can't see it in themselves. I love that you make me want to be a better person just by being around you." Lisa's eyes were getting misty, but Jake couldn't tell if it was from joy or discomfort. "I know we're friends," Jake rushed on, "and I know that friendship is precious and rare. I don't want to lose that, but I also can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just friendship. It's so much more than that." Jake ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit Lisa had come to know well. "I think about you all the time. When I wake up in the morning, you're the first thing on my mind. When something good happens at work, you're the first person I want to tell. When I'm having a bad day, just the thought of seeing you makes everything better." "Jake," Lisa whispered, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is a lot to take in. I know you might not feel the same way, and if you don't, I understand. I just couldn't keep living with these feelings locked up inside me anymore. You deserve to know the truth about how I feel." Jake looked directly into Lisa's eyes, putting everything he had into his words. "I love you, Lisa. I love you in a way that makes me want to build a life with you, to be there for you through everything, to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding your hand every night." He took a shaky breath. "I love you enough to risk this friendship, even though it's the most important thing in my life, because I think what we could have together might be even more beautiful than what we already have." Jake fell silent, his words hanging in the air between them like a bridge he had just built but wasn't sure he could cross. Lisa was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read, and the silence stretched on, filled only by the gentle sounds of the park around them. Everything Jake had been holding inside was now out in the open, and there was no taking it back. The silence that followed Jake's confession felt like the longest moment of his life. Lisa sat perfectly still on the bench, her eyes wide and fixed on his face. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the pond's edge and the distant laughter of children playing on the swings. Jake's heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. He searched Lisa's face for any hint of what she was thinking, but her expression was completely unreadable. Seconds ticked by like hours, and with each passing moment, Jake felt his confidence crumbling. Lisa's lips parted slightly, as if she was about to say something, but no words came out. She blinked several times, and Jake noticed her hands were gripping the edge of the bench so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Lisa," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. She just kept staring at him with those wide, shocked eyes. Jake felt a cold panic rising in his chest. This wasn't how he had imagined her reaction at all. He had prepared himself for rejection, for awkwardness, even for anger. But this complete silence was somehow Worse than any of those possibilities. Jake's mind started racing with terrible thoughts. Had he completely misread everything? Had all those moments he thought were special actually meant nothing to her? Was she trying to figure out how to let him down gently without hurting his feelings? "I'm sorry," Jake said quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I know this is a lot to take in. I probably should have kept my mouth shut. I couldn't hold it inside anymore." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, and Jake felt his heart drop to his stomach. He had made her cry. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. He had ruined everything between them. "Please don't cry," Jake said, leaning forward instinctively. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. I never wanted to upset you. I know this changes things. And I know you probably need time to process all of this." But Lisa still didn't say anything. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and Jake felt like he might be sick. He had been so selfish, so focused on his own need to tell her how he felt that he hadn't considered how overwhelming this might be for her. "Look," Jake said, his voice shaking. "I understand if you don't feel the same way. I really do. Our friendship means everything to me, and I don't want to lose that. Maybe we can just pretend this never happened," even as he said the words. Jake knew they were impossible. You can't just pretend away a confession like that. You can't take back words that have already changed everything between two people. Lisa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and Jake noticed she was trembling slightly. The evening air was getting cooler, and he realized she was probably cold too. He wanted to offer her his jacket, but he was afraid any movement might make things worse. "I should go," Jake said finally, standing up from the bench. "I should give you some space to think about all this. I never meant to put you in an uncomfortable position." As Jake started to walk away, he heard Lisa take a shaky breath behind him. He turned back, hoping she might finally say something, anything. But she was looking down at her hands folded in her lap. Jake's heart was breaking. All those months of hoping. All those moments when he thought maybe she felt the same way. All those times he had convinced himself that the looks and touches and comfortable silences meant something more than friendship. Had he imagined it all? He thought about the way Lisa had started spending more time with him, turning down other plans to be with him instead. He thought about how she had wanted to meet his sister, how she had seemed excited about it. He thought about all the little things she did that made him think she cared about him as more than just a friend. But maybe that was just who Lisa was. Maybe she was naturally caring and thoughtful with everyone, and Jake had been reading too much into her kindness. Maybe he had been seeing what he wanted to see instead of what was actually there. Jake walked slowly back toward the parking lot, his feet feeling heavy with each step. He kept hoping he would hear Lisa call his name, that she would run after him and tell him she needed more time to find the right words. But the only sound was the crunch of leaves under his shoes. When he reached his car, Jake turned back one more time. Lisa was still sitting on the bench, her silhouette small and still against the darkening sky. She looked so alone, and Jake wanted nothing more than to go back and sit beside her, to tell her that everything was going to be okay between them no matter what. But he knew that wouldn't be fair to either of them. Lisa needed time to process what he had told her, and Jake needed time to figure out how to deal with the crushing disappointment of her silence. As Jake drove home, he replayed every moment of their conversation in his head. He wondered if he had said too much, if he had been too intense, if he had scared her away with the depth of his feelings. He wondered if there was any way to go back to the easy friendship they had shared before he had complicated everything with his confession. Most of all, Jake wondered if Lisa's silence meant what he thought it meant in his heart. He was starting to believe that her lack of response was actually the kindest rejection he could have asked for. She was probably trying to find a way to let him down without hurting him, trying to figure out how to preserve their friendship while making it clear that she didn't feel the same way. Jake went to bed that night convinced that he had lost the most important person in his life, and that her silence had been the gentlest way possible of breaking his heart. Jake had barely slept. He kept checking his phone every few minutes, hoping for a text from Lisa. But nothing came. The next morning felt like the longest of his life. He couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't eat his lunch, couldn't think about anything except Lisa sitting alone on that bench in the park. By evening, Jake had convinced himself that their friendship was over. He had been too pushy, too intense. He had scared away the best person in his life with his selfish need to confess his feelings. The guilt was eating him alive. Around 6 o'clock, Jake's phone buzzed. His heart jumped when he saw Lisa's name on the screen. The message was simple. "Can we meet at the park? Same bench, please?" Jake's hands were shaking as he typed back, "Of course. I'll be there in 15 minutes." The drive to the park felt like the longest 15 minutes of Jake's life. He had no idea what Lisa was going to say, but he tried to prepare himself for the worst. Maybe she had spent the night figuring out how to let him down gently. Maybe she wanted to talk about how they could still be friends despite everything that had happened. When Jake arrived at the park, Lisa was already there, sitting on their bench. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much either. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing the same sweater from the day before. "Hi," Jake said softly as he approached, not sure if he should sit down or keep his distance. "Hi," Lisa replied, patting the bench beside her. "Please, sit." Jake sat down, leaving some space between them. The tension was thick, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Lisa began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know my reaction wasn't what you expected." Jake started to interrupt, to tell her she didn't need to apologize, but Lisa held up her hand. "Please, let me say this," she said. "I've been thinking about it all night, and I need you to understand why I reacted the way I did." Jake nodded, bracing himself for what was coming. Lisa took a deep breath. "When you told me how you felt, I was completely shocked, not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I had been waiting to hear those words for so long that I couldn't believe they were actually real." Jake's head snapped up. "What?" "I've been in love with you for months, Jake," Lisa said, her voice getting stronger. "I've been hiding it, just like you were. Every time we had coffee together, every time you made me laugh, every time you showed how much you cared about our students, I fell a little deeper." Jake felt like the world had stopped spinning. "But you didn't say anything yesterday. You just sat there." Lisa smiled, and for the first time since yesterday, Jake saw a hint of the warmth he had fallen in love with. "I was overwhelmed. Do you know how many nights I lay awake wishing you would say exactly what you said to me? And then when you actually did, I couldn't believe it was happening. I thought I'd ruined everything," Jake said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I thought you were trying to figure out how to reject me without hurting my feelings." "Oh, Jake," Lisa said, reaching for his hand, "I could never reject you. What you said yesterday was the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. "Really, really," Lisa said, squeezing his hand. "When you talked about thinking of me first thing in the morning, about wanting to tell me about your good days and your bad days, about wanting to build a life together, that's exactly how I feel about you." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So when you were quiet yesterday, I was trying not to cry," Lisa admitted. "I was trying to process the fact that the person I had been dreaming about being with actually wanted to be with me too." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing this revelation. Jake felt like a huge weight had been lifted off his chest. "There's something else," Lisa said softly. "After you left yesterday, I realized something. I realized that I would be honored to be yours." Jake's breath caught in his throat. "What did you say?" Lisa looked directly into his eyes, her voice soft but clear. "I said I would be honored to be yours, Jake, completely and truly yours." Jake was speechless. After all the fear, all the uncertainty, all the worry about ruining their friendship, Lisa was telling him that she felt the same way. More than that, she was telling him that she would be honored to be with him. "I love you too," Lisa continued. "I love your kindness, your patience with our students, the way you make me feel safe and valued. I love how you listen to me, really listen, when I talk about my day. I love that you remember the little things, like how I always bring extra sweaters and how I like my coffee. Jake reached up and gently touched Lisa's face. I can't believe this is real. It's real, Lisa said, leaning into his touch. We're real. Jake pulled Lisa closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sun set over the pond, both of them marveling at how a moment of terrifying vulnerability had turned into the beginning of something beautiful. So what happens now? Jake asked. Lisa lifted her head to look at him. Now we see where this goes. We take it one day at a time, together. Jake smiled, feeling happier than he had in months. I'd like that very much. As they walked back to their cars, hand in hand for the first time, Jake realized that sometimes the scariest conversations lead to the most beautiful outcomes. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to tell someone how you really feel, they might just tell you that they've been feeling the same way all along. Their love story was just beginning, built on a foundation of genuine friendship, mutual respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. And it had all started with Lisa's gentle words, "I'd be honored to be yours."